Hello, my name is Sophia Wilson, and this is my digital short. So, for this digital short, my topic is going to kind of center around the depersonalization of students within the college application process and its mental effects and how it poorly affects both stakeholders. My stakeholders are going to be potential UC students, so high school seniors that are applying to UCs, as well as the UC admissions institution. This fault line is going to take place in Los Angeles, California, just because I feel like that's a really big hub for college and academics in general. All the colleges there are very pristine and competitive. And then my main audience for this, I'm making this video for high school students that are applying to universities. As someone who used to be in that place, I think that a video like this would be really helpful for me just to kind of see the inner workings, the ups and downs, and kind of just more background information on what really goes on. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, so just for a little bit more background, I'm kind of going to be using this digital short to kind of go through all the main topics we discussed throughout our project 1, 2, and 3, just because I feel like it kind of encapsulates everything that I think and what I want to talk about. So we're going to start with project 1, where we took a closer look at the book Weapons of Math Destruction by Cathy O'Neil. The main issue that this book kind of surrounds is the overuse of mathematics and how it has infiltrated college applications in a negative way. In this book, Cathy O'Neil brings up a point in history that kind of launched the beginning of this over mathematicized application process. She talks about how in 1988, US News released an official ranking of all of the colleges in America based simply on points such as SAT scores, alumni funding, etc. The only issue was it didn't take into account the happiness of the students, how they flourished, what they liked about the school, if they would continue to go there or pick a different school. And this kind of put colleges in a bad light. It made them start to focus more on how much funding they could get, how high their SAT stats could be, how competitive they could make their acceptances. And this kind of began the beginning of the dehumanization process. This is bad, of course, because it takes away from the holistic side of applications, such as free response questions, open-ended essays, something that really gives a student an opportunity to show who they are and what they can be outside of just their test scores and their grades. However, this can be an issue because, as we all know, SAT scores are less about smarts and more about how much you can pay to get tutored for them. A quote that I really liked from O'Neill's book was, "The victims, of course, are the vast majority of Americans, the poor and middle class families who don't have thousands of dollars to spend on courses and consultants. They miss out on precious insider knowledge. The result is an education system that favors the privileged." This is from page 60. "It's all just a game of numbers and bragging, where students who can afford to hire individuals whose job it is to make them stand out among the crowd soar right to the top, and those who cannot fall behind in terms of SAT and ACT prep. Once again, this alters the ranking system by prioritizing numbers over everything else and dehumanizing applicants." However, in good news, there have been efforts to try and stop this, as universities are starting to realize that the game of numbers is more about privilege as opposed to smarts. An example of this would be one of our main stakeholders, the UCs, finally eradicating the use of standardized testing on all applicants. This next phrase is a quote directly from the University of California website. It says, "The University of California Board of Regents today, May 21st, unanimously approved the suspension of all standardized test requirements, ACT/SAT, for all California freshman applicants." This is good because it brings more focus onto holistic aspects of applications, such as essays and free response portions, and it is extremely helpful change as it comes from one of the top stakeholders itself, American universities, or more specifically, the UCs. Eradicating this section of the application helps to fight the depersonalization of college students, and it benefits potential UC students, which is the other stakeholder, of course. For this next portion of my digital short, I'm going to be having a song playing in the background. This song is What Was I Made For by Billie Eilish, and it's kind of about taking a look into yourself and kind of realizing that you don't really know what your purpose is, and it's a confusing process. And honestly, this is how I felt personally when I was applying to colleges, I kind of felt like, what makes me good? What makes me stand out? What makes me want to be wanted by these universities, which I think is a really big issue as we get into the psychological effects of college applications. So let's get into it. The college application system can be one of the most stressful and anxiety-ridden processes a person can go through. At the ripe age of 7 or 18, it seems like one's entire future rests simply on which college they can get into, and it seems like a reflection of one's character if they get denied. Students have been asking for a kinder college admissions process, as the toll it takes on one's mental health is nothing to turn a blind eye to. However, it's not solely the application process that can make this time of year so stressful. It's something that neither stakeholders in this position, students as well as universities, have very much control over, and that is the fear of judgment from one's family and friends, and the worry that the schools they will attend are not good enough or impressive in the eyes of those people. For example, Evan Baker, a high school senior in Carson, states that the college expectations of parents and classmates are daunting, and the stress imposed at school by well meaning adults can be overwhelming. From the Los Angeles Times. That is not a unique experience. College applications are stressful enough, and there is nothing more taxing to one's mental health than the idea that you were looked down upon by those that you love, or that you are less in those other people's eyes. If you take a look at the infographics that I have put in this slide, you can see that while yourself is, something that you feel a lot of pressure for when you're applying for colleges, a lot of it comes from parents and others that you feel are doing better than you, which could be your peers. In the graphic underneath, it shows that one of the most stressful parts of applying for colleges is the standardized test, which, of course, as I discussed in the last slide, has been, taken down a notch and unprioritized a bit. It's still something that can make students very nervous, as not all colleges have completely eradicated it. I know for myself personally, when I was going through the college application process, I felt so belittled and so small. Every single grade, every single score I ever got in a test was deciding my entire future, and colleges were going to look at me not because of the things that I wrote about. I mean, of course, they take a little bit of a look at it, but they're not even going to care about what you're writing if your grades don't match up. And I think that this is a huge issue, and it's something that made me feel extremely small. Getting denied from these big schools was completely gut wrenching for me. So I'm glad that there has been efforts to try and kind of eradicate this a little bit, but it's still an extremely big issue. All right, so since I spent the last slide discussing the psychological impacts that this over mathematicized application process can have on one of our stakeholders, which is prospective UC students, I also want to kind of discuss how the psychology of this can also be understood from the perspective of the UC application institution as well. It can be understood, of course, the trials and mental ups and downs that college applicants go through. However, it can also be understood on the other side. Breaking down a person to a test score in order to gain the highest scoring students is a psychological issue. That issue being the need to be the best no matter what. This brings me back to what we discussed earlier, the US News College ranking. This ranking makes universities feel that they have to ignore the essays. The ranking doesn't take into account, the backstories and the personal struggles of college students. They only look at the test scores and grades and all of that. So, it's no wonder that these American universities and the UC application institution in general feels like it has to just accept people merely for their academic success and how well they do in that space. All right, for this portion of my slides, I'm going to do another song in the background. This song is going to be Come Together by the Beatles because in this portion, I'm going to be discussing global communities, what they are exactly, and the importance of communication within these communities. This topic is something we discussed in Project 3, and it's really important when discussing, the difference between my two main stakeholders. In my analysis of a global community is that it's an online network of people or groups who can connect to one another based on personal aspects such as race, gender, politics, or general likes and dislikes. And this subculture for people has a set standard for what kind of information meets their expectations and what really speaks to them. That being said, the ability to communicate with other global communities is very important in the case of the college application system. Understanding how and why my two stakeholders do the things they do and how they kind of combat against each other will help us to get closer to understanding the difference between the two. In the next two sections, I will get more into ways that I can do this and how beneficial it would be to be able to communicate to both of these groups. To one of the main stakeholders in my issue regarding college applications and its mental implications, prospective UC students, I come forward as a member of its global community. I can communicate with this subculture with rhetorical elements such as understanding cultural nuances, which will be simple, as I am a part of this subculture, engagement by discussing relatable content, and credibility as someone who has gone through this exact process in the past. More specifically, however, I can get my information on the topic and fault line to them through social media. A quote from PR Newswire says more than half of teens, 54%, get news at least a few times a week from social media platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and 50% get news from YouTube. That being said, an example of the way that I could be able to communicate with this global community would be perchance making a post on Reddit, more specifically a college application subreddit, explaining my perspective of applying to colleges. I can use this time to discuss my topic, how depersonalized college applications have become, as well as the mental implications of the system and how it comes to a head at my fault line, LA County, and what I did as a high school senior in Ventura to get through this time. I could use slang that matches the vocabulary of people my own age, as well as talking about situations that I know they can relate to. Also, this video in itself is a way for me to communicate. I'm using a post on YouTube, which, as I said in the quote earlier, 50% of teens get their news from YouTube, to kind of communicate with you guys and tell you my side of the story and kind of break down the college application system to its parts. Now we come to my second stakeholder, the UC Admissions Institution. Now, communicating with them is a little bit different as they're not my own age. They're professional and they're well researched, so the way to talk to them, of course, would be through professionalism and research. More specifically, communicating with them would involve using a common language understood by these professionals, inclusive vocabulary that could help me to include every individual in my intended audience, as well as a professional tone in hopes to be taken seriously. As well as this, I would come forward to this global community, aka my stakeholder, with scholarly evidence and research. For example, using quotations with evidence to help back up my topic, such as a quote from verywellmind.com. Research shows that large numbers of teens are dealing with mental health challenges before starting the college application process, which can make them more vulnerable to rejection. This would help communicate my topic to my stakeholder. An example of how this would be scholarly is the article that I just quoted was written by Lakeisha Fleming, a writer with a specification in mental health that has been in the field for over 20 years, and it was reviewed by Karen Chili, an extensive research specialist with over 33 years of experience. The only way to be taken seriously by these professionals is if I present them information that doesn't just come from my opinions, but comes from people that are on equal standings as well as in terms of professionalism and respectability. Therefore, this will sort of put my ideas into the words of these professionals that American universities and the UC application system will respect, therefore helping me to get my point across. While this isn't a guarantee that it would change anything, it is the best way to communicate and at least have a chance. In conclusion, if you are applying to colleges for the first time, I hope that you come across this video and leave feeling a little bit more informed on this subject. While I know that this topic can be depressing, nobody wants to apply to a school knowing that they won't be considered as an entire person, merely just a test score. I want you to leave at least knowing that you can do this. It's possible, and I am proof of that. Hopefully, one day we can move forward and come to agree upon a more holistic application process, one that doesn't focus so much on things that are over mathematicized and should not be as important. And hopefully, the mental health of these students applying can be more understood, more appreciated, and more respected. All in all, though, I hope you guys really enjoyed this video and just know that you can do it. It's stressful, but you'll get through it and enjoy applying to colleges. Bye. Thank you.